Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cash Rules podcast. Today, we have a very special guest, but first, my name is Keith, and I'm here with my co-host,
Fabyan Roldan. What's up, people?
He's the head of research here. He's an educational program development specialist. And we have our special guest. His name is Dr. Marcus Bright. Before we start diving into conversation, I just want to start off by making sure that we are all aware that none of what we are discussing today should be taken as legal, financial, and/or tax advice. Instead, the objective of our conversation today is to really highlight some of the unspoken realities in education, to discuss why these realities so often go unspoken, and what we can be doing on a practical level to talk about the economics and really change what's happening there in an informational and educational capacity. With that said, Fabyan, how are you doing today?
I'm feeling golden. That's why I had to wear the Golden Girl shirt on today. I feel like the gold standard. How are you doing?
I'm absolutely incredible. And Dr. Marcus Bright, thank you so much for joining us. Tell me, man, how you doing?
I'm doing tremendous. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, it's a pleasure to have you. Definitely. I know definitely you're going to be providing so much information to ourselves as well as our viewers. We're looking forward to everything that you have to provide to us. And we look forward to take full advantage of everything that you say here. So thank you for coming on board.
Yeah, so just to kind of dive in, Dr. Bright, we actually met in a very interesting way. I was at an NFT conference here in Miami, and I saw a bunch of young Black men wearing ties and collared shirts. And I was like, what is going on? Why is there a bunch of kids here dressed up? And also, these are people that look like what I would look like if I were in high school or younger. And this is the kind of a thing that I would love to be doing. So who's responsible for this? And so tell us a little bit about, like, off the bat, what was going on that day and what were you doing at that conference?
So for the past 4 years, I've been a principal administrator for a program called the 5,000 Role Models of Excellence Project, which is a massive school-based dropout prevention and mentorship program in 117 schools. It was founded by Congresswoman Frederica Wilson in 1993. And that partnership visit to the NFT Basel conference that you spoke of was facilitated by an entity of the city of Miami Mayor's office, Francis Suarez, called Venture Miami. And a gentleman by the name of Keith Carswell called me a few days before that conference and said that we have 50 tickets for 5,000 role model students if you can get them there. So I called the principal of Thomas Jefferson Middle School, Ms. Rhonda Gaines Miller, and our 5,000 role model site director there, Mr. Richard Toussaint, and they worked miracles to get all those permission slips signed, and we got them to the arena. And those tickets, I believe, were $200 a piece. And so this was a conference that a lot of people in our community did not even know about. And if you knew about it, you may not have been able to afford to attend or understand what was going on. And so I just felt like it was an imperative that we seize that opportunity, and that those young boys were able to get exposed to what I believe is going to be a big part of the future of the economy in terms of blockchain technology and what's going on in the non-fungible token, the NFT space. And so that was really a magical day. I also met you. I met a guy by the name of Randy Raymond, who's a software engineer at Google, who I just met with Horace Mann Middle School today, and working on a pilot project to bring computer science at a very high level to that school, so that there can be preparation for participation in this new economy. And long story short, the bigger why of how all of that even transpired is that during the pandemic, Miami Mayor Francis Suarez issued a call, how can I help, in terms of helping Silicon Valley to come to Miami. And so we saw Silicon Valley, a lot of Silicon Valley and tech companies moving to Miami. Miami became the #1 city in the country for tech job sector growth, tech job sector migration. And I said, that's great, in terms of if you're already in the space and prepared to take advantage of it, which I saw that there being a big gap in terms of a need to rapidly prepare our community, particularly underserved portions of our community, to be a part of this STEM, of this tech pipeline. And so I began to write commentary about it, different publications, reached out to individuals around the mayor's office. We had a tech innovation tour in October of 2021 when we brought about 5,000 role model students there. It was there that a gentleman by the name of Isaiah Jackson, the author of Bitcoin in Black America, did a presentation on Bitcoin. And Mayor Suarez at that point pledged to give each one of those young men $100 worth of Bitcoin. By December, that pledge had ballooned to $1,000 worth of Bitcoin for all 55 of those young men. And you were there actually in January when we were distributed those that cryptocurrency to those young men. And so it was all part of that continuum of just trying to see a gap in terms of what was needed, and trying to, I believe that my calling is to be a bridge builder, to build bridges of equity, access, and opportunity through writing, speaking, and the building of strategic partnerships. And so I was, in responding to the call and trying to do what I could to create those avenues of opportunity, stepping out on faith, I believe. I believe you step out on faith, then God will take you the rest of the way. And so met the great Keith Smith, and the rest is history.
Yeah, man. And that was interesting, man, because when we did meet, we also immediately connected on the fact that we're both from Tennessee. And that was a very interesting piece of the story, because I thought that that was just big to me. I hadn't, I've been here for a long time. You don't meet a whole lot of Tennesseans out here, but you got that real Southern soul in you. And I understood that immediately. But besides that, there was a few things that you already said that I did want to touch on, because you sit in this very unique role as a community leader, right? And we've had, some educators come on the show. We've had some financial literacy experts come on the show and talk about things that they know. But a few of the things that I kind of took away from what you said already was, one, like being able to see an opportunity when it matters. So like kids and people in this community here in Miami, Florida, right, South Florida, may hear about these conferences that are going on. But first off, the kids are the ones that are going to be interested, and they might think to themselves, well, I don't have the money for that, or I don't have a way to get there, or I don't even, and because of that, like, you're not even going to try to find a way, quite frankly. And so what I think you did to kind of help these kids get to that spot to where they were there, they were immersed in that experience and that reality, was big, because it just gives them a whole new perspective of what's possible for them moving forward, period. Right. And then, so you had to know what the opportunity was. You had to see how they could get there. You had to make sure that they actually got there. And then, I just think that there's so much that kind of comes out of actually bringing the kids there before they got there, right? Like, they really had to know that that was something that was possible for them. And now from there forward, their whole paradigm is shifted around, okay, I can go to these conferences and I can shake hands with people there, and I can be an equal at a conference like this too. And so I think that's such a really big deal. I was not doing things like that when I was in high school. And I definitely didn't have anybody advocating for me in such a way. So I just want to commend you for that. To step back, tell us a little bit about like what you've done up to this point and what you're doing on a day-to-day basis right now.
Let me, before that, as we speak about the logistics of the conference, when I met you, we were sitting in the, it's called the FTX Arena now, where the Miami Heat play, and they were going up because the principal, they said, are they covering food? I said, no, just bring the school lunch, eat it on the bus, bring some peanut butter and jelly, eat it on the bus or whatever. Cool, I'm sure they're selling something in the arena, bring some money. And in the arena, they had gone up to get pizza or to get whatever was in the concession area. And they had cash but they weren't taking any cash. And you know, the pizzas there, they may be like $15, $20 for a piece, Papa John's, a piece, 55 kids. And I think the first young man tried to use a credit card and it got declined a couple of times. And someone saw it, unbeknownst to me, a lady named Angel Reed. While I was talking to Yuki, someone saw that card get declined, came over and bought pizzas for all 50 of those boys. And that's just, but that's the kind of day it was. And I just, anyone listening, that I believe that if you're doing something to really truly try to create opportunity and help the people, help your broader community, the community will step up, the universe will step up and help you to complete the mission. So I just wanted to add on to kind of the magic of that day, and just anyone who is seeking to do something to create a bridge for someone else, that if you take a few steps, the other steps will be made for you on your behalf. I truly believe. But I'm originally from, as you mentioned, Keith, small town in West Tennessee called Martin, Tennessee. The first generation of my family, get this, not to pick cotton. My mom grew up West Tennessee, picking cotton and going to school, but in the height of Jim Crow segregation, having to go to sit in a doctor's office waiting room, in the colored waiting room, and the white waiting room had to be completely empty for one Black patient to be seen, and going to the back of restaurants and segregated water fountains and sitting on the top of theaters, and just coming from that, and me having an appreciation of the sacrifices that were paid by the generations that came before me, who had the ability in many cases but did not have the opportunity. And so that was really drilled in me, that whatever it is that I was able to get in terms of education or training or resources, that you're not just getting it for you, but a price was paid, and you have a responsibility to pay it forward, and to make history for the next generation, to make a social impact for the next generation that comes behind. And so, came to Florida, ended up ultimately getting a PhD, public administration at Florida Atlantic University. A lot of my background has been in higher ed. I'm the student athlete and academic coordinator for the athletes at Florida International University. Taught public policy, public administration at 5 universities: FIU, FAU, Lynn University, University of Massachusetts Amherst, and Medgar Evers College up there in New York. And then, as I mentioned previously, 5,000 Role Models of Excellence Project, administrator for them 4 years. Founded a nonprofit called Education for a Better America, which was a sister organization to the National Action Network. And for 5 years, from 2012 to 2017, on my off days, my vacation days, we did programming in 15 different cities across the country, both from a programmatic standpoint, building strategic partnerships, but also participation in activism, as National Action Network is a civil rights organization who operates at the national level. And then currently, day job 9 to 5 with Miami-Dade Economic Advocacy Trust. And that is a division of the county government, very unique, who has the mission of ensuring economic parity and participation of Blacks within Miami-Dade County. It has 3 different divisions: housing, economic development, and youth services. My focus is on youth services, and we're in the process of disrupting the school to prison pipeline through a diversionary program that we run called Teen Court, but also building new pipelines of career access and opportunity, and trying to work with companies like Google to bring pilots for computer science, and hosting big career pathway summits like we're doing on November 4th, where young people can be exposed to a lot of different career paths, and giving guidance and seeing role models within those career paths, and giving a roadmap in terms of what they can do to actualize their career vision and their career aspiration. I'm also the senior advisor for the Rising Coaches. Go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No,
Okay,
I wanted to definitely ask you a question about that. Go ahead, please. Well, my question was, you do so much around these youth, right? So how do you connect with them? How do you interact? Can you talk about that experience real quick, just a little bit? Because I
Yeah,
usually see
well,
that as a programmer myself, an educator. I usually see that disconnect sometimes, so
yeah, it can be
around the
tough.
world. Yeah, it can.
Well, I had the great fortune after when I came back from New York, Medgar Evers College, and Congresswoman Wilson asked me to be the administrator for the 5,000 Role Models of Excellence project. And the structure of it is that you have big chapters of boys in 117 schools, grades 3 through 12. And so there was already an infrastructure where I could go into these schools, and we had an adult site director, and when we had a base of students, now we went in there and grew the chapter of students through recruiting with them. But I made, for 3-4 years, I may go in 3 or 4 schools a day meeting with students. Each of those schools before the pandemic were going 4 to 5 different field trips to museums, to colleges, to hospitals, to prisons, to you name it, to the Dolphin games. And so on a day-to-day basis, I was either meeting them somewhere in the field or going to their school, or meeting with them in their chapter meeting, and developing relationships with the students, with a lot of the parents. We worked tremendously hard to create incredible scholarship opportunities for students. Last year, they had 102, but I'm not, don't get me wrong, it was over 100 scholarship recipients in terms of graduating seniors. Most of them went on
Awesome.
full scholarships. Right now, there are 52 5,000 role model students at Tennessee State University, Nashville, on full scholarships. And they're at Clark in Atlanta, and they're at institutions all across the country. And so just in the process of working, every day, and I think that, getting in alignment with God's calling on my life. And I looked at that every day. I never looked at it as a job. I looked at it as a calling. And I believe that the doors that you open up for others are equivalent to the doors that God will open up for you. And so I just came. I wasn't, even though we worked within the context of the school district, I didn't report to the superintendent. I didn't even report to the congresswoman. I felt like I reported to God first, to a higher authority, and and just tried to serve. Service is power, I was taught. So I just tried to serve in the best way that I could, and in that infrastructure was able to meet and connect with a lot of students, and a lot of teachers, administrators, and being able to work together. I think that same week, that conference is on a Tuesday, and I met Keith and Randy, who I aforementioned from Google, and I said, man, our kids, they need to know about you all. I called John F. Kennedy Middle School and North Miami Beach Senior High School and just created an event for them to come on that Friday. You remember that? So there were 5,000 role model schools who came, and they just came in. I think the following week, because we were running up on Christmas break, I think I had Keith at about 3 or 4 schools, in one day. So you saw what I was talking about. I mean, we went Carroll City Senior High School, American Senior High School, Highland, Miami Lakes Senior High School. So Keith was on tour with me.
Before we interrupt you, we do need to, but can you see if you can turn your phone to the side so that we can get the full?
Am I sideways? And I apologize.
Well, not even, but if you can go up and like take the lock off too, and then try to turn it sideways so that it'll.
How do I take the lock off?
If not, it's okay. We'll just
That's a lot better visual. That's a better visual. Yeah. I really wanted to talk to you, and I'm glad you brought up a lot of good stuff regarding your interaction with these students, and you kind of went into the importance of you being there, right? So what are some of the characteristics that you see in students that you see become successful in life? What are those little nuances that you're like, oh my gosh, that trait right there, you're the next Michael, or you're the next Tesla, or etc. Like, what do you see that sparks your interest in one in particular individual sometimes, if not a mass of individuals?
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about a young man by the name of George Pickens. And he's one of those students who's at Tennessee State University now. But what he was so special because a number of different things. So he ended up being the valedictorian at Miami Northwestern Senior High School. I met him when he was a junior, and a month after I met him, his mom, he's really close to his mom. His mom died, and we were there, and his whole 5,000 role model chapter actually came to his funeral, because he was the president of that chapter, and that showed me a lot because to be such an exceptional student, he was also a servant leader and a leader of the young man within that group. And to understand and appreciate the context of that, Miami Northwestern is in Liberty City, which is one of the most economically challenged and high poverty, high crime areas within Miami. And so you have, for him to be able to navigate, those kind of surroundings, and a lot of other directions and influences that he could have had. So he just had an exceptional amount of focus. And I asked him, I said, how are you able to do this? And he wanted to be a medical doctor, and he kept that vision in front of him, and he guided his focus and his efforts. And he got up in the morning and meditated, and he put his dreams up, and he looked at his dreams, and he focused on his dreams, and that was one of the things that really pushed him. And he had a lot, I think, the ability to work and to delay gratification, and to be almost your own support system. Not that he didn't have external support, but to get those kind of grades in that kind of environment, that's a lot of studying with nobody's clapping for you. that's a lot of grinding. And he would go to school, and then he would go to Miami-Dade College after school and do dual enrollment classes, so that he pretty much graduated with an AA degree when he graduated from high school. And so to be able to be your own, to be that support system, to have that kind of internal drive, that internal desire. And get this, another thing about Miami Northwestern is that they perennially have one of the best high school football programs in the country. This is the same school that produced Teddy Bridgewater and Amari Cooper and Tutu Atwell and a ton of different pros. They have a ton of different, big time college players between them and I think Miami Central. They just played on Friday. Central's ranked number 3 in the country. And I think that it's a great model in terms of how you can maximize the potential of young Black males in the athletic.
So do you consider that
field.
to be? So do you consider the model in which Northwestern has as being a way community leaders and educators should use in order to harness young individuals of underserved communities? Do you feel that's the way to go about things?
Well, I think, number one, I think for George, it highlights how special he was, because I think he was the only male even in the top 20. And so to be that uncelebrated,
Mm-hmm.
to get no applause, to get no props almost, and to push yourself in a school, in a community that prioritizes and values football that much, right? I mean, it's something special. But I think, and not to dissuade football, because I think football has been an incredible dropout prevention program. That's where a lot of young men get mentorship, via their coaches. And I think that it's a model that we can replicate. I'm trying to replicate that model, beginning with Tech. See, down here, they put that talent. They put that talent in a pipeline when you're 4 and 5 years old, playing for the Gwen Cherry Bulls and the Liberty City Warriors and all these other teams, and they're out there being pushed. They're being coached. They're being cheered for. They're being supported. The entire community is vested and interested, and they value the progress of those young men as they come up. And then when they get to Miami Northwestern, they're used to performing under pressure. They get that. The only drawback is that if you invested your entire identity into being a football player, your entire self into being a football player, all of your dreams are wrapped up in being a football player, and then the football is done after high school or after whenever it's done, then where do you go?
Right.
There has to simultaneously be the
No, but you're totally
cultivation
right. I
of
think
other dreams, other aspirations. But we can do the same thing in other fields.
with everything, right? And that's the whole idea, right? And I don't want to get towards tunnel vision to just sports. And I think that's what you're getting at, is that the extracurricular activities that George was able to harness at that time allowed him to become critical thinking in terms of all the things that he can actually navigate. The sport allowed him to become a team player. The sport allowed him to get that drive to become better at what he did. Then he translated that into academics. That makes total sense.
Right.
And I agree with you totally percent there. And we see that across the nation in terms of just less programming.
So I want to dive into this because you are actively looking at, finding ways to give another outlet to some of these students. And then I just love the perspective that you added on it, because you had this idea of, okay, this is helping students. They are being able to get the mentorship that they need through this. But some kids aren't into football, or maybe they don't have that mentorship or that outlet, right? So then tell us a little bit about how you're thinking on how are these conversations with these tech companies going? How are you thinking about how to have a real impact on the youth through professional services and things like tech and everything that you're seeing there?
Well, I think that companies are willing to assist and help. They need avenues and infrastructures like a 5,000 role models, so that their time is not going to be wasted. And we need to do some of the foundational work at the school site level, at the community level, to get young men ready and prepared, both in terms of social skills and technical skills. But that same kind of pipeline, right? You're not gonna you can't get a full scholarship to University of Miami, University of Florida, FIU, wherever you're gonna go in football, if your talent has not been cultivated to that level. And so we have to also cultivate talent in other fields, not just tech, but the legal field or whatever one's desire is. Begin to cultivate and begin to see and appreciate the value that young people have outside of just athletics.
And even at home too, right?
Figure out a way at home too. Absolutely. And I think one of the things that George was telling me about was they used to have these robotics competitions and academic competitive school competitions when he was younger. And that was something that you could build up to, because I think that model in terms of putting some healthy competition within it will ultimately iron can sharpen the iron. And the reason why Miami Central is number 3 in the country is because they want to make sure they can beat Northwestern. So they're going to run the extra sprints and pump the extra weights and have that additional mental focus to be able to succeed on the field and test yourself against the best. So we want to be able to in the spirit of collaboration, in the spirit of connectivity, also be the best that we can be in a very competitive marketplace, and cultivate talent. One of the things that working on with Randy is a computational thinking assessment, taking that in terms of seeing what students may be naturally gifted in coding, for example, and then offering a CS computer science first coding class to everybody, but everybody may not be on the same level initially, right? So having a tailored experience for everybody versus just everybody just getting the same thing. Everybody, for example, I grew up playing basketball. Many people played basketball. Some played rec league, some played intramurals, some were on freshman team, JV, varsity. Some were all state, some were, some played AAU. I played for the Memphis YMCA, a team out of Nashville, Tennessee Travelers. We beat them. Memphis dominated basketball and all that, in West Tennessee. But we can build some of those same infrastructures of opportunity and produce greatness in the same way that we dominate athletics. And you dominate athletics not because of superior facilities. not,
No, you're right. I
not,
mean,
not be, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, the way I kind of looked at it was that you kind of hit nail on the head earlier in terms of we need to kind of reestablish how we look at education, how we look at involvement with students, and then somewhat how we look at interaction between home, school, community, right? And I just go back to the home aspect a little bit. And how do you see, what is the importance of involving parents in the educational system or process?
Yeah, I think it's important, and I think that I think that we just encourage parents to be involved in the best way that they can. We know that a lot of circumstances, can be complicated, and I think that that's why there are policy. Our community, and I speak about the Black community in particular, has been decimated from 40 years of the mass incarceration epidemic that has really, really targeted, especially Black men, and wiped many brothers off the board economically, or at least severely handicap their ability to have socioeconomic mobility. Because when many of them have gotten a criminal record, early on, for things that others may have gotten a slap on the wrist for, or may have gotten a warned and dismissed for, but they've locked us up, giving us criminal records. And then even worse than the prison time is the prison label. When you come out, and then you can be legally discriminated against as a second-class citizen in terms of housing, employment opportunities, education, public sector benefits. And I agree with Michelle Alexander in her book, The New Jim Crow, when she talked about it has created, in some sense, a socioeconomic caste system that has a real racial component to it. And so many of us have been, especially Black men, have been wiped off the board. But I think the message can be that even if, regardless of your economic circumstance, because many brothers feel like if they can't contribute, what they want to contribute economically, then they're valueless, in our hyper materialistic society. But in whatever way that you can, contribute, and it can look different. So we can certainly, help parents. The situations are challenging, and I think as long as folks are doing the best that they can, that's all we can ask, because
No,
we don't. I'll just say there's some complicated, situations and scenarios, and being transparent. Even my son is in New York now, so it's a challenge for me to get up to. He's 3 years old, but it's a challenge for me, to have the kind of connectivity with him that I even want. So I'm finding different ways to stay engaged and to be able to contribute to his development as well. We do the best that we can, but we can always do better.
So I want to touch on this because, I mean, first off, I think you did a good job of laying out just some of the big challenges that kind of hurt these communities economically, right? Even like not being able to get access to certain housing, not being able to get access to certain jobs anymore because of what's happened in the social environment, right? And then some of the impact, right, that can come from, economic situations that these people were already in, right? Some of the things that they're being surrounded by, some of the things that they're seeing as a way out, right, might be the wrong answers, or things that put them in positions where they can't get up anymore. So what I really wanted to touch on was thinking about, my goodness, I'm blanking out right now, but okay. So financial literacy, to change the tone a little bit, like tell us a little bit about, because you and I, or you yourself, first off, were leading this kind of like round of how do we go and teach kids about blockchain, or even just like financial literacy in general? What is money? Things like that. What trends are you seeing? Because Florida has laws in place now that actually mandate some sort of curriculum around financial literacy. How are you seeing that changing? Are you seeing any changes around whether or not kids are learning personal finance or anything about finance in school?
I don't have the latest in terms of how exactly it's being implemented. I think it's being implemented on each school is doing something differently. I think when it was brought to me, because I helped to facilitate the tech innovation tour that I spoke of with the mayor's office. And I thought we were going to go in there and talk about tech. And then when the mayor shifted it to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, and I didn't know anything about it really. And I'd heard of it, but I didn't know. And I felt a tremendous responsibility, being a central administrator for a program that has 7,000 boys in it. And all of this is going on. The American Airlines Arena is now FTX Arena. Staples Center is now Crypto.com Arena, Crypto.com Formula One racing. And I saw incredible financial assets coming into Miami as the mayor was trying to make it into the one of the crypto capitals, the capital of capital, as he would say. And I didn't know anything about it. And so I said, if I don't know about it, I'm sure a lot of other people don't know about it. And we just didn't want to be, it seemed like there was a lot of economic opportunity, in the space. And I knew that people were really making quantum leaps in terms of their own personal economic growth. And I just didn't want our community to be left out because we were already in many places starting from way behind in terms of not having the same kind of intergenerational wealth transfers that other communities due to historic, oppression and being left out of a lot of wealth building opportunities in the past. So as I mentioned, I mean, we come out the cotton. I come out the cotton fields of West Tennessee. So there's ain't no, when it's time to buy a house. See the wealth gap. You really see it when you get into adulthood and it's time to buy a house, and such may have the same job as you, but they had a big house because somebody else made the down payment based on wealth that had been funneled down to them, right? Or whatever, or whatever wealth asset maybe may have been funneled down. And so on average, communities of color, particularly Black communities, doesn't have that. And so there's a tremendous need, given how far behind we are economically, to empower ourselves as much as we can, and to understand not just from a personal financial literacy standpoint, but also how we can build collective economic power and economic bases and get a fair share of things like public sector contracting. And
so that's what I was about to go on to.
Those kind of things. Yeah.
What do you feel is the solution to the wealth gap? Because I know you do a lot of work on diversity, equity, inclusion, and we're talking about financial literacy here a little bit as a spectrum in terms across the board, not just for students, but across the board in terms of community of color, underserved communities, and etc. What do you feel like is your solution to the wealth gap? What do you think should be the first step, if anything? Because I know there's multiple steps to it. I guess the real question should be, what do you think is the first step to solving the wealth gap for underserved communities?
Well, I think the biggest step would be some kind of repair for centuries.
Like reparations, or
you can call it reparations, or a debt that's owed. Economic justice in terms of some kind of a restoration being made for centuries, for generations of economic exclusion that was embedded within the law of the land. We were legally excluded, and so we need to be legally included in a major way, and a debt is owed. I'll say that at the federal level. So that would be the most transformative action. Now, in terms of number two, at our local levels, it is getting our fair share of the public sector contracts in terms of for Black-owned businesses, in terms of goods and services, and what the school districts, wherever your local school district is spending, or your county governments or your city governments, we should be getting our fair share, at least based on our percentage of the population. Now that can go from looking at the procurement processes and demanding justice there, but also building the capacity of businesses to be qualified to play. Because sometimes sometimes we don't get it because we're not qualified to play. We don't have the infrastructure in place to be able to handle some of the contracting opportunities. But there are even if you're not a prime contractor, you can be a subcontractor and what have you. So that's from a business standpoint. But also, I think Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the last 3 years of his life, as he shifted toward economic justice, they formed something called Operation Breadbasket. Read about it. Reverend Jesse Jackson became the national director of it. But I think in looking at and continuing, picking up where they left off in terms of, because most folks are not, and we push entrepreneurship, but the economic growth in most folks is going to be getting a higher paid job, right? Or getting, you know what I'm saying? So also workforce participation. And even, and you can start with the company, let's start with the private companies that are getting public sector dollars in contracts. They should have an equitable share of blacks at every level in terms of their representation there, and looking at the companies that we spend our making companies value our dollar. I know we're very high consumers of tech, but that's not necessarily reflected in the workforce and who's making the money. And so being strategic about where we spend our money. And they used to have, in Operation Breadbasket, don't shop where you can't work. So looking at the diversity numbers of these companies, and until they get to a certain point, withdrawing our dollar, making them value our dollar.
And there's a bit of a nuance to how this is working today, right? Because when we use some of these tech products, there is no transaction necessarily, right, being spent. We're not giving anyone our money to scroll on Facebook all day or to scroll up and down an Instagram timeline, right? And so where the nuance comes in is if you're using that platform and they're able to serve ads to you, and maybe you interact with some of those ads, right? Or you're producing content for this platform, you're actually also contributing to some of this sort of payment, and it's just in a different form now, right? Like you're actually helping them build their platform by posting content here. So doing an audit of like how we're spending our time on these platforms, I think is also extremely important, because our attention holds that value in a different way now. So, but then I also wanted to go back just a little bit. This may be one of the last things that we touch on. I feel like this concept of reparations is something that could be extremely controversial, extremely difficult. And I want to like push back on and just really just question you on how do you think someone can go about finding a fair way to do something like that?
Great question.
I think, yeah. And it's a great question. And I think that, I think there are a number of different ways to do it, but, there has to be, and I'm not, I don't have the silver bullet answer, quite frankly, but I think that, with the great minds that this country has, and if pressure, is generated and a focused effort in terms of, we can figure out a way to do it if effort is done. But
pressure bust pipe, right? But
right now, right now they're just. I mean, there's a lot of punting and pacifying going on, and maybe let's vote on a commission to study. They can't even get that done, and so we do that. Keep putting pressure on, But in the meantime, start where you can locally, even if it's a few. Look at the major employers in your city, and let's take a look at what they're doing. What kind of avenues of opportunity, and that's why I am looking at tech, because big tech has come in here. Folks have come in here. They're making a lot of money, and I ain't hating. I'm not pocket watching them like that. I'm not a hater, and I salute them. But at the same time, it has put pressure on those that are already here. In terms of Miami is number one in the country in terms of the the percentage of rent that's going up. It's going up like 50% in 2 years. And so
we're talking about now
that's pressure.
gentrification. We're talking about
Yeah,
gentrification now,
gentrification,
which
and
is
then
a whole
I'm talking
different
about just
conversation, but that's it.
yeah, and down here it's not just certain areas. It's just like those that hold important roles in the community, like teachers and firefighters and police officers and
Totally right.
social workers and people like that. When they go to renew their lease now, because of the influx of people that have come here, for not just tech but just remote workers and everybody else, when they go to renew their lease, guess what? For the same unit, we now need $1,000 more a month. We now need $1,500 more a month. We now need $2,000 more a month. That's what's happening here on a regular basis, and people are being driven out of here. So so the pressure has been turned up on us, the people that live here. We're gonna turn the pressure right back up on those that have come, because they have an obligation to also pay some dues in this community and create a pathway if you're gonna be here. Cut us in or cut it out.
Love it. Love it.
I think you're totally right. And I just want to speak on your second notion real quick, just let the audience know that there are some moves in terms of states going about making sure that a certain percentage of funding is gone to minority-owned businesses. In New York State alone, we have what is known as MWBE or MBE contracting, which is minority business enterprises as well as minority women-owned business enterprises. And what happens is that anything state or federal city contracts have to be a certain percentage, about 15% or so, have to be designated to that of those contractors. So that's one way of starting the conversation, and that's another way. But it's not enough, as you were stating before, because now New York is one place, one entity. You're in Miami, you're in Florida, where they're not having, but I do see the correlation in terms of the justification, as I state, which is going on in New York State, right? Where everybody's being pushed out the same way, higher rent costs, less work. The trades that were able to sustain some people within our 5 boroughs are no longer adequate enough for the commerce that's happening. And I see the same correlation down in Miami, as you were stating now. And I think you're totally right. Those 4 or 5 steps that you were saying, those are certain things that as a community, we need to pressure our elected officials in order to do things a little differently so that we're able. Thank you, man.
I lived in New York for a year now. I lived in New York for a year, and the housing up there, I mean, if you didn't buy a house with Patrick Ewing and John Starks in them, it's gonna be tough.
You right about that? Right about that.
Love it.
How you feeling, Keith?
I think it's time. I think it may be time.
It's that time. Wrap it around, baby. A little old school.
So Dr. Marcus Bright, at the very end of these conversations, we do a rapid round. I'm going to ask you a few questions. I just want to get some of the first thoughts that come to your head, maybe like 15 seconds or so to answer. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Let's do it. Tell me, Dr. Marcus Bright, what is money?
Ooh. Money is a vehicle to freedom.
Love it.
A vehicle to freedom.
Love it, man. Tell us, who do you look up to the most, either dead or alive?
Frederick Douglass, because he had the imagination and belief that he could do something to create a climate that to change an institution that had been in place for over 240 years. And he was escaped from slavery, taught himself to read and write, and made the decision to put his life on the line every single day for a decade to try to free his people, when he could have just said, well, I made it, I'm free, I'm in the North. He could have just lived a comfortable life, but he answered the calling on his life, and we're all better for it. Frederick Douglass.
Love it. What is your favorite book?
The book that transformed my life, when the first book that came to mind, was autobiography of Malcolm X. Just the way that he was able to transform himself, and how he educated himself in prison, and really use education, use his self-education and discipline, and weaponize it to improve the image of Black folk in this country, their own self-image, how they felt about themselves, and just the way that he used intelligence with such vigor and such passion, and he was just an embodiment of manhood.
We share the same book, brother. That's my favorite book as well.
We didn't land on Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley
landed on us.
Tell us, is there a podcast that you listen to that is your favorite?
You know, I don't know if I have a favorite one. I mean, I used to listen a lot to Ticket to Success, Eric Thomas podcast, but now I just kind of listen. I listen more to like Audible books and Blink List. So I wouldn't necessarily. I mean, I guess you go ET. That was the last one I was on. Eric Thomas, Ticket to Success. That was the last one. This your boy ET.
I know Cash Rules is up there too. You know what I mean? You ain't got to always put us out there. But you know,
coming,
we there.
It's coming. Cash Rules. Cash Rules is coming.
Love it. And then Dr. Marcus Bright, for people who may want to reach out to you after this, which they definitely will, tell everyone, where can they reach you?
On Twitter at Dr. Marcus Bright, Instagram doc Marcus Bright, email drmarcusbright@gmail.com. Again, Dr. Marcus Bright, Twitter, Doc Marcus Bright, Instagram, email drmarcusbright@gmail.com.
Love it.
Love it. And finally, I just want to go ahead, man. I think 30 seconds or less. Tell us what's going on, what you got going on coming up, what people can look out forward to once they reach out to you, once they follow you on IG, Facebook, LinkedIn. What you got coming up in 30 seconds or less?
Coming up, we taking over college basketball again. Rising Coaches Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Alliance coming back. Year number 2, equality and inclusion games across the country. So you can look out for your favorite men's and women's college basketball team during the month of February to be lifting up, their selected issue of social justice. So you'll be hearing more about that. So you can get involved with your favorite college sports program, men's and women's basketball team, and support what they're doing off the court.
Love it.
Beautiful.
And then thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. Thank you out there to all of our viewers, our listeners. This has been another episode of Cash Rules. Fabyan?
And like they say, if it ain't about the money, you ain't calling me up. I mess up that song every time. I just want to tell you. Peace out.
Peace out, everybody.